What's going on, guys? This is Martyrs Brigade 99 coming to you once again with another session of Dark Souls PvP. Alright guys, we're back at it again for it's basically just a series of matches, and I'm just talking about a lot of randomness for the most part. Now, to start off this particular video, first off, I want to say I want you guys to really pay attention to a lot of these matches. I had a lot of good matches, and actually it was nothing scheduled. I was just kind of randomly in the MLB one night, and I just so happened to run into some great players, especially Lag Stabu. Right, so Lag Stabu, whoever you are, shout out to you, dude. You're really good in PvP. I enjoyed having those matches. Maybe we could fight some other time when we're both in the MLB. Alright, but aside from that, one thing that I wanted to talk about in particular that I never really touched on is, some of the motivation for me to come out with at least this particular topic is watching one of Foxio Games' videos. Shout out to Fox. And he was basically talking about the challenge of being an uploader. Right, and as I sat there and listened, and actually this is not a brand new video. I listened to it back when it was first uploaded. It was just something that I listened to. I agreed upon it, and I just kind of went on with it. But as the days go on, and I continue to read comment after comment, or I will read forum post after forum post, or I read entry after stream entry, I figured I would just go ahead and have my own personal take on what it's like to be an uploader. Now, first and foremost, before I start getting into the experiences, let's talk about what motivated me to upload to begin with. Now, just a little back history. I started off with Demon Souls. And I've kind of touched upon this a long time ago. I'm not really a gamer, right? I've probably purchased about 3 or 4 games within the last, I'll just say 4 years, right? I'm a big fan of the Killzone franchise, and I also love Souls games, right? So for the most part, those are the games that I play the most, right? So back when the first Dark Souls was released, I watched a lot of YouTube videos on it. A lot of those videos were basically showcases, really, right? Not really too much on the commentary side, at least from the videos that I watched, back in 2009. Wasn't really too many commentaries, but it was a lot of showcases. So once Dark Souls came out, you started to see more and more people voice their opinion or explain things and talk about a lot of things. As a matter of fact, I think the very first Dark Souls video I've watched was one of Epic Name Bros, because I don't know if you guys are familiar, but with him being in Japan, he had first access to Dark Souls, right? So I mean, not only watching the game trailer and review on game trailers, I also was kind of checking out Epic Name Bros channel back then, just to kind of get a heads up on what we would all eventually experience once the game was released here in the United States. Well, actually, I'm in Canada now, but back then in the United States. So anyway, as time went on, we started to see more and more commentators. As a matter of fact, there's 2 particular guys that I used to listen to a lot when the game was first released. The first being Ego Zeno. He calls himself the Dark Souls enthusiast. Now, he doesn't really play too much Dark Souls anymore. As a matter of fact, he's like kind of all into the Dota kick. But back when this game was first released, he dedicated a lot of videos and commentary to Dark Souls, and I really admired that. I really liked his commentaries. I really liked a lot of things that he had to say, whether I agreed or not. I liked the fact that he invested a lot of time into doing something he really didn't have to do, but obviously he did it for the love of the game. Now, another player and huge voice, especially when the game was first released, was good old New Gaming. And I think I've kind of touched about this, and especially if you guys are kind of been with me for a long time, you guys will know that I talked a lot about new gaming back when I first started uploading. New gaming was kind of like one of the Dark Souls guys with regard to commentaries, and I used to watch a lot of his videos, and there were a lot of things that I disagreed with. Right, and one thing that I used to do, now I wouldn't dislike the guy's videos, I would just flame up his comment section. Right, in other words, if it was something I didn't like, I would flame his comment section. If it was something I disagreed with, I would flame his comment section. So much so that the dude even blocked me. Right, and this was, I think this was really early when the game first came out. That guy would block me because, you know, he would say or do something that I thought, that I personally disliked, or that I personally thought was a contradiction. And, you know, I would flame his comments and give my opinion and all that, until one day, you know, after he blocked me, you know, I continued to watch a few videos. I actually got so pissed off that I said, you know what, screw this crap, I'm going to create my own voice. Right, and actually that's one of the reasons, actually two of the motivations for me to even start to upload. And actually that was way back then. I give a lot of credit to good old New Gaming. He's done a lot of good things for his channel, and I'm pretty sure a lot of his subscribers really enjoyed the contributions that he's made to the community. Right, so that's not saying anything about New Gaming. I'm just talking about how I originally got started to becoming an uploader. So anyway, I you know, worked a little bit, saved up on a little overtime, and I went on ahead and made an investment, because I said to myself, you know what, I have my own views, I have my own perspectives, and instead of flaming other people's comment sections with my opinions, why don't I just go ahead and create my own voice? And that's what I did. I made the proper investments. I figured out, you know, what exactly, you know, to do, how to edit, and how to record my voice and everything, and hey, the brigade was born. Now, it took about a year for me to get to the place to where, actually I'll say a year and a half, because actually I started last March. And for a lot of you guys that are original subscribers, you guys would know that, you know, from my earlier videos, you know, I was a lot different than what I am now. But I mean, that's kind of one of the stages you go through as an uploader. You know, you just kind of reflect on things, you mature, and you kind of develop, and you make changes as you go. But as time went on, despite getting a lot of negatives, despite getting a lot of dislikes and a lot of negative comments, I started to realize that my channel started to grow. You know, at that point I thought that I would go ahead and, you know, try to join some of these you know, kind of like community based mediums, you know, kind of like Dark Souls Wiki, the Wiki Spaces, the Twitch streams, and a lot of these other mediums. Now, as the months went on, I realized that my channel really started to grow. But despite my channel growing, my interest was always in making contributions to a game and a community that I loved. Right? And, you know, those intentions a lot of times are not seen, because people seem to think that you as an uploader are responsible for every single thing that happens in the game. And a lot of times it's discouraging. I'll give you guys a classic example. Just not too long ago, you know, one of these pros, you know, because the pros, well, I'll just say what happened. One of the pros made the comment that I, you know, the brigade, am single-handedly, actually, let me take that back. Not that I am, that I have single-handedly destroyed the Dark Souls PvP community. You know, not the hackers, you know, not the person with modded stats, not the person who uses a modded crystal greatswords and one-shots people. You know, not a person who modifies their attributes with infinite health, infinite everything. You know, not them, but me, the brigade, who has made over 200 contributions, most of which are commentaries that last at least 20 minutes of doing nothing but offering my opinions and making observations about a game that we all love. But despite all that, somehow I am responsible for destroying the community. And a lot of times, one thing about me, before I start jumping on the defense, I'll simply ask for clarification. And when I say, so I ask the person, I say, okay, so why do you think I, the brigade, single-handedly just destroyed the whole Dark Souls community? And and obviously, a lot of times I can tell when I'm dealing with people who are not sincere, because they'll just give you some illogical, irrational, and weak arguments. He basically said, well, because your opinions suck. And because your opinions suck, you have single-handedly destroyed the community. So, okay, it's easy to disregard that. I'm just using that example to say that, a lot of times as an uploader, people place all this weight and responsibility on you that everyone basically has an equal opportunity to offer. In other words, the brigade does not hold a monopoly on Dark Souls information. The same thing that motivated me to start uploading and making commentaries can be the same thing that motivates anyone else to go out there and make their own contributions. In other words, these people, they think that just because your channel grows, then therefore you alone are responsible for everything. Here's another example. Good old Epic Name Bro. Shout out to Epic. Despite all the contributions he's made, despite all the time that he took to invest, which he didn't have to, I'm pretty sure he does it because he loves the game like so many of us do as well. But he created a video talking about his own personal opinion. His own personal opinion of what he thought was the best dex weapon based upon his own gameplay experience. And shortly after that video was released, I would go ahead and visit the streams. And while on the streams, whenever either the uploader or whenever the viewers would notice someone with the great scythe, it would be just ridiculous reading the comment section of everyone talking about, oh my god, you see what I'm saying? You see what Epic did? He was responsible for this crap. And I'll be thinking to myself, like, how is Epic Name Bro responsible for anyone's weapon choice? And when I would sit in the stream and ask that question, they'll say something like, well, because of that video he had. So then I would think to myself, like, okay, but that's that man's opinion. How is that man's opinion responsible for the actions that go on in the Dark Souls PvP community? Number two, so what? If he thinks that's the best dex weapon, then who really cares? And then they would just make these weak arguments about how it's not the best and what other weapons are considered the best. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, well, if your opinion is different, then why be salty and sour at this man for simply having a voice and making it available for others to listen to? Like, in other words, how is Epic himself at fault just because other people may have listened to his opinions and said, you know what, well, let me give this weapon a try. Let me just go ahead and try it out. Because just as he thinks it's his, favorite, best dex weapon, maybe I'll find some things that's good about it that I've never been exposed to before. But somehow, simply him having that opinion and expressing it was a bad thing. And to this day, I still don't understand the logic behind that. So one of the biggest challenges to becoming an uploader is, for some reason, people place, all this burden on you. As if to suggest, you can't express your opinions because of the potential effect that it could have. But the reason why that makes no sense to me is because none of us hold a monopoly on anything. Like I said before, just as I was motivated, just as Epic may have been motivated by someone else, just how, a lot of these streamers are motivated by simply sitting back and watching other people's streams. Everyone else still have that same potential. Now, whether you choose to do it or not, well, that's on you. But no one is responsible for anything. Most of us who make these contributions make them because we like the game. Not because we have these devil ears and we're like, let's go ahead and control what everyone else does. Dude, we're not Illuminati of Dark Souls, so get off it. For those who believe in the Illuminati. We're not the Illuminati of Dark Souls. Right? We don't have devil horns and we're not pulling these mystical strings to control what everyone does. We share our experiences, and based upon how we support our opinions, some people may say, well, I can kind of agree with that, and as a matter of fact, let me try it. In other cases, especially for newer players who may not know anything about the game, it may look to these videos and commentaries to perhaps get a broadened perspective. And, perhaps this broadened perspective may help out in their own personal gameplay experience. So, just because, you pros or some of you other people who may know otherwise, because your opinions may be different based upon your own personal experience, somehow they believe that it is bad of uploaders to share their own because of the impact and perhaps influence that it may have on other people's, decision making. But I don't see that as a bad thing. And even if you do see it as a bad thing, all you have to do is simply create your own voice. You don't have to sit up here and troll the comment section. And actually, like I said before, this was a lesson that I had to learn because I was guilty of it myself. Until I woke up one day and I said, you know what, if I really don't like it, in other words, if you can't beat them, then why don't you join them? And that's what motivated me to create my own channel. So, like I said before, one of the biggest challenges, aside from all the salty comments, aside from uploading a video and just a half second later getting a dislike, when it's like, dude, the video was up for a half second. It's not even long enough for you even to know what's going on. Aside from that, so the challenge for me is dealing with this idea, this ridiculous idea, that somehow I, as an individual contributor, am somehow responsible for everyone else's actions. That's my biggest challenge. Just dealing with that irrational, illogical idea. So my advice for everyone, especially seeing that Dark Souls 2 is slowly arriving and seeing that, we'll probably have even more contributors, is that to the extent that you want to become a commentator, because see, when you commentate, you offer opinions, you say views. Keep in mind, this is assuming that you're not doing a walkthrough. But channels such as mine that talk about various topics, just keep in mind that the number one prerequisite, in my personal opinion, is for you to have thick skin and to understand that you can never please everybody, nor should you try to please anybody. Do what you think is good for your channel. As time go on, based upon my experience, you will naturally develop and change and improve, based upon things that you think you can do differently. Other than that, you should tailor your channel to what you want to do. And please, you have to have thick skin and do not let these other people's opinions and comments about you hinder or discourage your efforts. Alright, so on the last note, I'd like to give a shout out to every single Dark Souls and any other game commentator or contributor, because I understand what you guys go through, because I go through it the same way. Even though I still have a relatively small channel, I still experience it. So shout out to all you guys. I applaud all you guys' efforts, as well as a lot of your subscribers and supporters. I'm pretty sure they applaud your efforts as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary, and until next time, Martyrs Brigade is